Thanks for joining me on Testing Insights. I'm really excited. I've been wanting to geek out with you a long time around scorecarding. That's what I want to talk about today. Can you briefly, though, first introduce yourself in terms of why are you relevant to experimentation program work?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ben. Currently, I'm a product manager at Facebook, working on growth, monetization growth for all business messaging products. Prior to this, I was at Yelp, where I was supporting the team building Request to Code, their home and local services marketplace, and also built out their experimentation program and platform.
Cool. Awesome, man. I first came across you with I think it was a WO webinar when you were at Yelp, and you were geeking out quite a bit on scorecarding. And so that's what kind of brought you on my radar. And those are the three questions I want to ask you today are around scorecarding. To provide that context, I've got a mental model that I love to think about with regards to communication just generally. And that's this mental model that says it's not enough to know. So it's not enough to have the results of a test. It's not enough to implement based on those results. You also have to distribute that knowledge to the right people at the right time, in the right format, in the right way. Because if you don't have that system of communication to where you're leveling up everyone around you, not just yourself or your small team in terms of what works better for whatever customer, then it's a major loss in a lot of ways. And so that's where scorecarding and communication kind of comes in, and it's just a really cool thing to think about it, or it's a lost, it's an area that I think a lot of people relegate, basically. They just focus on the wins. Let's get it implement, let's report out to my manager, and they don't think about like the community around you, whether it's a team or company as a whole. So my first question around this, Rohan, is where do you see experimentation scorecards in particular being successful? Like, what are the team sizes and structures where it matters the most? With whom does it help the most? Can you articulate from your point of view the importance with regards to the whom and the how with regards to scorecarding?
Makes sense. Firstly, for those who are not, firstly, just to be on the same page of what we mean, or at least what I mean when I'm saying scorecarding, is scorecards are a representation of the results of an experiment, either in progress or at the end. And also, like, a lot of people use scorecarding as a means of like archiving their experiments for people to be able to go back and stuff. I've seen various different flavors of scorecards depending upon what size the company is and which stage they're in respect to their experimentation journey. Some people have just, an email. Some people use just Excel or like Google Sheets, like throw the results on that, but have like a template how people fill out experiment results. Whereas some other people have a fully automated, like fully fledged, like a system. For example, Facebook. Facebook has a very mature experimentation practice and a very robust tool, which we can get back to. And these scorecards also, people have like different views and flavors of these for execs, for like the team which is running the experiment, or just like a high level experimentation, like scorecard for the entire company. How many experiments did we run? How many shipped? How many didn't ship? And what were the gains? So to answer your question, where and how do I see experiment scorecarding being useful? I think it's super useful for any company which has more than one person building a product. People and culture, as you mentioned, like it's not just useful to build like a robust like experimentation stack. You need to distribute the results. People and culture are two of the most important and hardest parts of the experimentation equation. You could build the most robust experimentation stack that exists, but the human error will always exist. Without a scorecard, the primary problem that I see is that the results of the experiment are interpreted in very different ways. The two jobs of an experiment scorecard is primary jobs. It does a lot of jobs. The two primary benefits are one, standardization, and second, democratization of experimentation. And both of these lead to a significantly faster decision-making process. The standardization piece comes in because you standardize how results are being interpreted. Think about this scenario. When a data scientist, a product marketing manager, an engineer are all trying to make a decision on the same experiment, if you give them the exact same results, they will interpret numbers differently because of different statistical, different like how they think, different statistical rigor, different expectations, and also like just purely different levels of statistical knowledge. It's not everyone's job to know like the in and out of stats. But if you have a scorecard, and this was a behavior I saw pretty commonly in Yelp. Like you could put we invested a lot in making sure that people were able to understand the visual representations of a scorecard, not necessarily the stats behind it, which is to say, like, if there's a number and this number is displayed in a green color, you know it's statistic positive. And if a number is grayed out, it's not statistic, that number doesn't mean anything. So if you could put anyone in the room with varying levels of statistical knowledge, they might not understand exactly what p-value means, what these confidence intervals mean, or what different aspects behind this number means, but they knew if this is not green, it's like either neutral or bad or like means nothing right now. So don't use that number in that way. Secondly, coming to the democratization part, when you create a standardized language for everyone to be able to speak experimentation, you don't need a data scientist every single time to have that conversation. Like some things are a straightforward yes, some things are a straightforward no, which having a standardized way, the same language to speak experimentation, it makes it faster for people to move and like, make product decisions and move ahead. Also, I think of one really, really useful use case of like having scorecards, and that too in a standardized format, is that when someone in the future joins the team or someone like starts to think about a problem space, they can just go back and look at all archive of experiments and see things that we've already run, like build off of those learnings as opposed to just having to do the exact same thing again and again. Specifically at Facebook, I think that's one of Facebook's like superpowers and like just unfair advantages almost, where it has like 10 years of accumulated experimentation data, and so many things have been tried and tested over such a long period that you always build off on someone's learnings. You always have a certain advantage because I can always go back and look at experiments, and I know how to like interpret it and look at it because they were using the results in the same way. And it's easy to understand. So to actually summarize that, I think it's really important for every company to invest in it. On top of their stack, have a standardized experimentation scorecard, which will help everyone speak the same language and move much faster to make decisions.
Yeah, brilliant response there, Rohan. That's great. And particularly in the beginning, the way that you set it up was a little bit from your background. You're at Facebook or Meta now, but you've been at Yelp, but the scorecarding is relevant for anyone, even if there's more than two people building a product or more than one person building a product. So it's relevant to the standardization that allows you, and then the standing on the shoulders of those that came before you. So thinking about definitely not like the unfair advantage crowd of like Facebook and maybe Booking and things like that, but your average legacy companies that are starting to get into experimentation now. Where I see struggles is around when these scorecards come out, maybe they're not visually as cut and dry as you articulated there, is how it needs to be to communicate it really well. The problems we see is around the routine nature in which they can come. And so my second question, in your experience, how do you use scorecarding in a way that doesn't get so routine it gets ignored? And maybe some of the visual part, that small point you mentioned around the visual cues that comes in there. How do you deliver this artifact for max engagement? And do you ever measure that engagement? Like we send a scorecard out in an email or this, and what's the open rate or what's the engagement rate? Is that being measured, et cetera? That's kind of a sub question.
Yeah. So to answer your first question, so I've seen experiment scorecards, like, as I mentioned, like different levels of maturity. Some people are just doing Google Sheets. Some people have like an automated like email that comes up. Some people have like a full-fledged tool that you can just go and look for at any given point of time. And obviously all three of them like depend on the level of investment you have, and like all three have like varying levels of like how much logging and measurement can you actually do with different tools. Now, with respect to the routine aspect, I think I almost want to say that it should be as routine as possible. Right? Going back to the idea behind like standardizing how experimentation scorecards look like, feel like, and in your company, like how does like anyone think about it? Is super useful, right? Like if it's like the same process happen in the same way, like it's reliable, it has a regular cadence, it's more trustworthy. Like it's going to happen. For example, before we built out an experiment scorecard at Yelp, we had an automated email. everyone knew once the experiment gets to power, and we set some expectation. There was a tool to like do a power analysis and set some expectations in the beginning. You will get an email. So there was this like predictability around it by setting expectations and knowing that you get an email, and you knew when you got that email, we had static results or like something had gone wrong. So you knew you had it, you knew you had either you were ready for a decision or you had to look at it. Now, with respect to how to maximize engagement, I think that again goes back to how decision making and what processes like are followed in your company. Like how are these decisions made? Are these decisions made completely like asynchronously? Is just emails good enough, or like everyone just needs to like go onto a tool, just say yeah, go ahead from me, like an Asana checklist sort of a thing, or you have like weekly experimentation reviews, for example, where everyone's gonna like get into a room and discuss these things. So it depends on what sort of like how the decision-making processes are made.
My third question is, put that in contrast with things like town hall style group meetings or workshops. With the test reporting and the scorecarding, it's meant to be that consistent cadence of results or status updates, as you put it. But then there's also room in a lot of programs to evangelize, to enroll more people into the practice, right? Train maybe, but also just enrollment and make aware of over the quarterly town hall. Over this quarter, we had X amount of learnings. This is kind of the program stats, this amount of decisions. Here are the customer stories that we have, right? That we can tell and articulate. And this, so an expensive town hall meeting, expensive meaning you got a lot of people there, right? It takes up a lot of people's time, not automated because there's storytelling, there's interpretation, there's human aspect of it. So how do you see, the question here, how do you see the cadence and the usefulness of that town hall in contrast to the automation, I guess? Like, is there any learnings there? I just want to put them in context to, this automated way to get information out to people, and then this kind of a more group enrollment side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So you need both, in my opinion, for like, because they both cater to like very different use cases. So it depends on your use case and the stakeholder. So for example, there's a team which is working on the experiment, which is building it. Then there's a group of people that get together and like be a part of the decision. And there's like, managers and like execs who need more higher level reporting. So for the first set of people who are working on the tool, they need more, they need more granular and more regular updates. If things go wrong, are you getting enough samples? Like all of that jazz. Like if the experiment broken, is the experience like damaging something, during revenue loss, whatever, so they can react fast. This is where the key emphasis is on the time sensitivity nature of this information. Things are wrong, you need to know now. Then there's a group of people which needs to make this decision. For this, I've always gone with like a weekly experimentation review, where we just pull up our scorecards, people sign up for this, entire crew gets together, who are like key stakeholders who are like directly involved with the product, and also other people for whom it's like an FYI. Depending upon who signs up and what what experiments are ready to be made a decision, we loop in people accordingly. And the third is more of an exec level view, where it's not specific to every single experiment. It's more so at like a team level. Like this team had run so many metrics, so many went through, so many didn't ship, and this is what this is how these metrics improved. So all three of them have like varying degrees of like, let's meet in person or let's have it automated. The first one, because it's time sensitive, it's all automated. The second one is a combination of using the automatic generated scorecards plus having a conversation, because as you mentioned, you can have all the tools, but 99% of the experiments are actually never a straightforward yes or no. It's almost always a trade-off. Are you willing to take that hit? This is where that conversation needs to happen along with the scorecard piece.
Well, thanks, Rohan. Brilliant answers on all three of these. Keep it surgical. That's all I wanted to take up your time on today. Appreciate you coming and geeking out with me on this.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben.